Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel Risk Modeling Hub. I'm really happy today that you are here, as today we'll understand one of the misunderstood aspects of IFRS 9: how loans move through what we call the three stages of credit impairment. Now, if you have watched video 7 on default definitions in banking, you saw me hint at this at the end. So we need to understand, how do I actually determine whether a loan is in stage 1, stage 2 or stage 3? What are the precise rules? And that's exactly what we are covering today in complete detail. Whether you are preparing for credit risk interview, building an ECL model for your bank, or just trying to understand how modern banking actually works, the staging framework is the foundation. It controls everything. It determines whether you recognize a 12-month loss or a lifetime loss. It changes how the interest revenue is calculated. It even impacts the capital requirements under Basel III. But here's the thing: most explanations out there just give you the definitions. But we need to understand the mechanics, the actual calculations, and the time periods involved, and how the real loans actually move between the stages. And that's what we are going to do today. So, now let's start with the foundation. IFRS 9 uses a three-stage impairment model. Stage 1 covers the performing loans, where you recognize a 12-month expected credit loss. Stage 2 kicks in when there's a significant increase in credit risk, and here you shift to recognize the lifetime expected credit loss. Finally, Stage 3 applies to the credit impaired assets, where you continue using the lifetime expected credit loss. So, why does this matter? Because the jump from the 12-month to the lifetime ECL between the stages can dramatically change your loss provisions. And this is where many audit questions arise. Today we'll be covering 6 key areas. We'll compare all 3 stages head to head, explain what actually triggers a significant increase in credit risk, explore the critical difference between the 12-month and the lifetime ECL, walk through the detailed calculations, and show how banks implement this in their actual portfolios. And finally, I highlight what auditors and regulators are really looking for. So by the end of this session, you will have full worked examples. You can defend that in your audit, and the knowledge that you apply this framework confidently to your own credit exposures. So let's get started. Why staging? Why should you actually care about this IFRS 9 staging? This is because it directly impacts the 5 critical areas of banking operations. First, look at your portfolio composition. Stage 1 holds the performing loans with 12-month expected credit loss provisions. Stage 2 contains the underperforming assets, where you are now calculating the lifetime ECL. And that's where the provisions jump significantly. Stage 3 captures the impaired loans already in default and also on a lifetime ECL basis. And this mix tells the credit story of your entire bank. Now here's what actually matters to your career and the business: the financial statements, the earning volatility, capital ratios, cost of funding, the investor's confidence. The rating agencies monitor the non-performing loan percentages. A deteriorating stage 2 and stage 3 profile triggers the downgrades. So staging isn't just accounting mechanics. It's how the market reads your credit risk. Understanding this framework, and you will understand how the banks really work. So now this slide basically shows a fundamental shift in how banks think about the credit risk. Before 2018, the world used the incurred loss model under the IAS 39. After January 1, 2018, the IFRS 9 introduced the expected credit loss model, and understanding this change is critical to your career. The old way is the incurred loss model. Here, the approach was purely reactive. You only recognized losses after they actually occurred. And here's how it worked: a borrower would miss a payment, and then you would get a provision. So, you wouldn't provision until the loan was 90 days past due. But the result is that the provision lagged the actual deterioration of your books, and your financial statements always look better than they really were. Now, the new way, the expected credit loss model. This is forward looking, and you recognize losses before they happen based on the probability. So, think about it. One day, one of the origination, you immediately provision based on the probability of default. And a typical new loan might get a 1.2%. PD provision right away. And this is fundamentally different. So, the key change is the mindset shift from wait for the problem to anticipate the problem right away. Under ECL, provisions move with risk earlier, smoother, and smarter. And your financial statements now reflect the economic reality sooner. So, this wasn't just a technical accounting change, it was a philosophical one. Banks now move from being reactive to being predictive about the credit deterioration. And this is why the understanding the IFRS 9 staging is so critical to modern banking. Now let's go through the waterfall system that governs the IFRS 9 credit loss recognition. Understanding this flow is essential, and it's how every loan moves through the impairment framework. So, stage 1 is performing. A loan starts from here. There's no significant deterioration in credit risk. You recognize the 12-month expected credit loss, only the losses you expect in the next year. Here, the interest is accrued on the gross carrying amount. And this is the healthy zone. Most of your portfolio sits here. Here, the trigger is the significant increase in credit risk, the SICR. And this is where it gets critical. When credit risk worsens the materiality, you cross into the stage 2. And this isn't just subjective. There are objective criteria as well. A borrower's credit score drops, payment behavior deteriorates, or market signals worsen. And the moment the SICR is triggered, everything changes. Stage 2 becomes the underperforming. So now you have identified a significant increase in credit risk. You shift from 12-month ECL to lifetime ECL. And this is where the provisions jump dramatically, typically 3 to 5 times higher. Interest still accrues on the gross carrying amount, but your loss allowances is much larger. And this is the warning zone. The trigger is the credit impairment or the default event. When objective evidence of default appears, you move to stage 3. So, stage 3 becomes the impaired ones. Here, the borrower has defaulted, and you recognize the lifetime ECL. Now, the interest accrues on the net carrying amount and after the loss allowance. Probability of default here is typically 100%, and this is the crisis zone. So, the key takeaway is that each stage represents a different economic reality and triggers different accounting treatments. So, master this waterfall and you have mastered IFRS 9 if you have completely understood this waterfall system. Now, welcome to stage 1, the performing portfolio. And this is where the healthy loan lives. And it's the foundation of IFRS 9. So, a financial asset stays in the stage 1 from the moment you originate it until there's a significant increase in credit risk. And that's it. Simple. As long as nothing materially worsens, the loan remains performing. So, stage 1 loans have 5 key characteristics. First, the borrower's credit profile hasn't changed materially since you originated the loan. Second, they are paying on time, so no delinquency. Third, their credit rating is the same or better than when they started. Fourth, there are no adverse market conditions affecting their business or sector. And fifth, there are no covenant breaches or financial distress signals. So think about it. These are the loans behaving exactly as expected at the origination. So how would you measure stage 1? For this, you recognize a 12-month expected credit loss. Only the losses that you expect in the next 12 months and not the entire life of the loan. Your interest basis is gross. You accrue the interest on the full carrying amount. And your provision level is low because the risk is low. And this is forward looking but limited to the near term. So the key principle is that the stage 1 is forward looking but limited to the next 12 months. So stage 1 typically includes new loans with strong credit profiles, established customers with consistent payment history, investment grade debt securities, performing mortgage portfolios, and corporate loans to stable and profitable businesses. Now we move to from theory to actual numbers, and this is where the stage 1 provisions comes to life. Stage 1 ECL equals to the 3 components multiplied together. EAD times the 12-month PD times the LGD. And let me break this down. EAD is your exposure at default, the outstanding balance that you have at risk. 12-month PD is the probability of default over the next 12 months, expressed as percentage. LGD is the loss given default. So what percentage of that exposure you lose if the borrower defaults. So let us take a corporate loan. Outstanding balance is 2 millions and the origination LGD is 5.5%. Remaining maturity is 3 years and your 12-month PD is 1.2%, and that's your key input. The lifetime PD is 4.5%, but we ignore that in stage 1. So LGD is 60% here. So if you look at the calculations, the stage 1 ECL equals to 2 million times the 0.012 times the 0.60, and that's equal 14,400. Right? If you are looking carefully onto the calculations. Now, but wait, the slide shows the 9,600. Now let me recalculate. If you can multiply this 2,000, 200, 2,000 and 1,000, like 2 millions, multiplied by 0.012, multiplied by 0.40, that will equal to 9,600. So the LGD here is 40%. On the day 1 of origination, you make an accounting entry. Debit, the loss allowance is 9,600. Credit, ECL expenses 9,600. And you are provisioning for expected losses immediately. And comparing this to the old incurred loss model, you would provision nothing on day 1. And now you are forward looking from day 1. So a 2 million loan gets a 9,600 provision immediately based on the probability. And your provision on day 1 and not when a problem occurs. And that's the IFRS 9 revolution. Now this is a critical detail that trips up many people. In stage 1, the interest is calculated on the gross carrying amount and not the reduced by the ECL allowance. Interest is calculated on gross as we discussed, and your 2 million loan accrues interest on the full 2 million loan, even though you have provision 9,600 for expected losses. The ECL allowance doesn't reduce your interest calculation. But the question comes up, why interest on gross? The 3 reasons can be: first, the loan is performing. The borrower is paying on time, so you expect to collect the full contractual cash flows. Second, the ECL is a conservative provision and not an admission that you will actually lose the money. Also, third, that you are expecting to collect every dollar of the interest contracted. So the gross carrying amount is 2 millions. Original EIR, the effective interest rate is 5.5%. And the annual interest revenue equals to this 2 million times 5.5%, which is the 110 triple zeros, 110,000s. The ECL provision of 9,600 doesn't touch this calculation. So in this, people often ask, isn't the interest calculated on the net amount? So the answer is no. The ECL allowance affects the carrying value on the balance sheet, but not on the interest revenue calculation in stage 1. So on the balance sheet, you will show the loans at gross of 2 millions, less allowance of 9,600 and giving a net carrying amount of 1,990,400. On the income statement, you would recognize the interest revenue of $110,000 on the gross, and then you would record the ECL expense of 9,600. So the net P&L impact, if you see at the right corner, it is the 100,400, which is positive P&L impact. So the interest is on gross, provision is recorded, loans are still performing, and that's the stage 1 accounting. Now this slide contains one of the most important rules in IFRS 9. It is mandatory, automatic and non-negotiable. If a borrower is 30 days past due on any payment, there is an automatic presumption of significant increase in credit risk. The loan must move to stage 2 immediately. And this is not optional. There is no management judgment allowed. So listen carefully to what banks cannot say. They cannot say the borrower has a good excuse. They cannot say this is temporary and they'll catch up. They cannot say that their sector, the one they were working for, isn't just performing and has a bad month. So none of these arguments matter. The 30-day backstop is objective, hard and automatic. Payment behavior is the clearest signal of the credit deterioration. So when a borrower goes 30 days late, the risk profile has materially changed. IFRS 9 doesn't allow banks to rationalize this way. So Month 1, the payment arrives on time. Stage 1. The ECL that we computed is 9,600. Month 2, the payment is late and it is 20 days past due. Still stage 1 under the 30-day threshold. Month 3, the payment is missed entirely and now it is 30 days plus past due. Automatic stage 2 transition happens here and ECL jumps to 62,688. It is more than 6 times higher. And the income statement would also charge the negative of 53,080. So stage 1 means no delinquency whatsoever. Even 1 day late can trigger the review. And stage transitions happen fast when the objective triggers the hit. Regulators and auditors will ask, why wasn't this flagged at 30 days past due? So the answer must be it was, right? Now the critical pivot point in the IFRS 9. A loan moves from stage 1 to stage 2 when one thing happens. A significant increase in credit risk, SICR. So stage 1 is performing, loan is healthy, but no SICR is detected here. When the credit deterioration materially happens, you identify a SICR. And the moment this is triggered, the loan moves to stage 2, where it becomes underperforming. So everything changes here. Your ECL measurement expands from 12-month to lifetime ECL. And think about the impact. Instead of provisioning for losses in the next 12 months, you are now provisioning for losses over the entire remaining life of the loan. And that's a massive expansion of your loan allowance. Provisions jump 3 to 5 times on a single stage transition. And this is why the stage movements matter so much to earnings and capital ratios. A single loan can swing your quarterly P&L significantly. So have you ever thought about why this matters? This is the essence of IFRS 9 being forward-looking. Stage 2 catches the credit problems before the default occurs. And here you are not waiting for the borrower to miss the payments. You are identifying the risk deterioration early and the provisions accordingly. And that's the predictive, not reactive. So IFRS 9 is forward-looking. Stage 2 catches the credit problems before the default occurs. And this is the essence of the expected credit loss provisioning. And you are ahead of the curve and not behind it. Now let us define the triggers. We will dive into the SICR definition and the triggers. And that's where the real complexity lives. So this is stage 2 and SICR is everything here. A financial asset moves to stage 2 when there has been a significant increase in credit risk since initial recognition. But the asset is not yet credit impaired. That's the key phrase. The deterioration has happened, but the default hasn't occurred yet. Stage 2 loans are underperforming but still paying. The borrower hasn't defaulted, the credit quality has clearly declined, and the default risk has increased substantially. But they are still making the payments, possibly late or maybe a little bit reluctant, but they still are doing that. So from psychological perspective, think of it in this way. A borrower's credit profile has deteriorated materially. They might be struggling financially. They might be making payments late but current. They haven't missed a full payment yet. And this is the early warning zone. Look for several signals. Loans with significant rating downgrades, 2 notches or more. Borrowers on the internal watch list requires heightened monitoring. And loans with the covenant breaches that haven't been waived. Sector-wide stress testing which are impacting the borrower's industries. Facility limit reductions due to the credit concerns. And there can be other characteristics as well. Stage 1 has no significant change in credit risk since origination. The asset behaves as expected. Stage 2 is middle zone, the early warning stage between the performing and the impaired. And stage 3 is objective evidence of default. Asset here is credit impaired. So stage 2 is where you catch the problems early and before the default, before the crisis. And that's why the IFRS 9 becomes the forward looking. Now this is where this SICR gets real. There are mandatory triggers, quantitative thresholds and qualitative judgments. And all three work together. First, the non-negotiable rule. If a borrower is 30 days past due on any payment, SICR is automatically triggered. Banks cannot override with the reasonable evidence, and this is objective, hard, and automatic. No exceptions. And beyond the 30-day backstop, there are measurable criteria. Internal rating downgrade. So, if a borrower's credit rating drops by 2 notches or more since the origination, SICR is triggered. Bank A, let's say, uses 2 notches, Bank C uses 3 notches, and each bank sets their own threshold. Borrower financial stress, if you look at the margin compression, EBITDA decline of approx 20% or more, and there is a deterioration or leverage ratios increasing by 2 times. The facility limit reduction, bank is tightening their credit limits due to the credit concerns, and this is objective evidence of the deterioration. These require the judgment but must be documented. An internal watch list, like the credit committee formally flagging the borrower for heightened monitoring, and this indicates the elevated credit concern. Sector-wide stress, like oil pricing collapse or real estate crash, industry downturn, triggers SICR for the borrowers in the affected sectors. And these are judgment based but must be written down, consistent and defensible to auditors. The exemption should be given to the low credit risk, as they may skip the SICR review. Investment grade bonds like AAA rated counterparties or the government securities. And in practice, most banks apply this only to the bond portfolios and not the loans. So SICR is judgment based, but the judgment must be written down, consistent and defensible to auditors. Different banks use different thresholds, and what matters is that you document and apply them consistently. Now let's come to the stage 2, the moment of truth. So basically, when a loan moves to stage 2, one critical input changes. Probability of default switches from the 12-month to lifetime, and this creates a provision jump. In stage 1, the ECL equals to the EAD times 12-month PD times LGD, and here the horizon is narrow, next 12 months only. In stage 2, the ECL equals the EAD times the lifetime PD times LGD, and the horizon expands to the entire remaining life of the loan. And that's the difference that actually matters. So, the facility here in our example, it is staying the same. EAD here is still 2 millions, and the remaining maturity is still 3 years. The EIR is still 5.5%, and LGD is still 40%. But the PD changes dramatically. If you look at it, in the stage 1, 12-month PD was just 1.2%. And in stage 2, the lifetime PD jumps to 8.5%. Do you know why? Because the borrower credit rating has been downgraded 2+ notches, and they are on the internal watch list. The 30 days past due backstop triggered, the sector stress is impacting them. And all these SICR triggers combined mean the default risk over the remaining 3 years is much higher. And therefore, the stage 2 ECL calculations final amount comes out to be 68,000. So if you remember, the previous stage 1 provisions is 9,600, and current the stage 2 provisions jumps to 68,000. So net increase, if you subtract both of them, it is 58,400, 58,400. So basically a 7 times jump on a single facility. And this is why the stage transitions creates earnings volatility. So have you ever thought about why did this PD deteriorate? We have discussed a bit that the borrower's condition deteriorated, the credit rating downgraded, and the 30 days past due triggered the backstop. Sector stress hitting them hard, and all point to high default probability over the loan's life. So basically the borrower hasn't defaulted, they are still paying their loans, but the provisions jumped from 58,400 because the default risk increased materially. And this is IFRS 9 forward-looking provisions in the action, capturing the deterioration before the default occurs. Now let's add a layer of sophistication, the discounting part. Now this is where the many people gets confused, but it's critical to get it right. So basically in stage 1, discounting is not material. and you are only looking at 12 months ahead. But in stage 2, discounting becomes material because you are looking over 2 to 3 years. And in stage 3, discounting is very material because now you have large time horizons and potentially longer recovery periods. So the principle is simple. A dollar of loss expected in 3 years is worth less in the present value terms than a dollar of loss expected in the 1 year. So the discounting formula equals to the undiscounted ECL divided by 1 plus of the original EIR raised to the power of t, where t is the time period in years. So from our stage 2 example, the undiscounted ECL is 68,000. Remaining maturity is 3 years, and the midpoint t, the average default time, the average time, if you look at it under the until the default has happened, we can take it as 1.5 years. Original EIR is 5.5%. So if you contribute everything in the formula, the undiscounted one, if you remember, it is 68,000, but the discounted ECL becomes the 62,680, and the difference is negative of 5328020, or if you convert it into percentage, it is minus of 7.8%. And that's meaningful. The time value of money reduces your provision. What is the value today and what's value after a couple of years, like 1.5 years or so. So previous stage 1 ECL was 9,600. Current stage 2 ECL discounted is 62,680, and net provisions, they increase from 53080 and not 58400, and this discount reduce the charge by 5320, which we have computed from the difference, the discounting impact. But the discounting is a technical choice. Different banks use different approaches. Some use midpoint, some use year by year. What matters is that you document your approach and apply it consistently, because auditors will ask, how will you determine that T? How did you do that? And your answer must be documented and defensible at that point of time. Now here's the counterintuitive part of stage 2 accounting that surprises many people. Interest revenue stays the same even though the provisions jumped. The provisions here jumped from the 9,600 to 62,680, which is a massive increase. But the interest revenue remains 110,000, same as stage 1. So how is this possible? Because stage 2 loans are still performing. And the 3 reasons regarding why interest on gross always, it's because first, the stage 2 loans are still performing. The borrower is still paying the obligations or time or current. Second, the ECL provision is a conservative estimate of risk and not an admission that you won't collect. Third, you'd still expect to receive the full contractual cash flows. The borrower hasn't defaulted yet. Now in stage 3, everything changes. The interest accrues on the net amount after the provision. The provisions are much higher and the interest revenue drops here. And stage 3 is where the real P&L hit happens. Stage 2 is forward-looking conservatism. The provisions increase but interest stays the same because you still expect the repayment. Stage 3 is objective impairment. The borrower has defaulted or cannot pay. The interest accrues on the net and the provisions are massive. Now the interest reflects what you actually expect to collect. In stage 2, you still expect to collect everything, so interest stays on gross. The provisions capture the deterioration, but that doesn't change your revenue expectation. Now this is the final transition, the credit impairment. A loan moves from stage 2 to stage 3 where one thing happens: objective evidence of default or credit impairment. Stage 2 is the underperforming stage. The borrower shows significant credit deterioration, still paying the obligations, and the provisions was approx 62,680. The lifetime PD is 8.5%. The interest accrues on the gross carrying amount of 2 millions. And this is the warning zone. The credit risk is elevated. But the default hasn't occurred yet. The moment you have that objective evidence that the borrower has defaulted or cannot pay, the loan moves to stage 2. The 90-day past due backstop is mandatory. Even if a borrower is 90 days late, the automatic stage 3 classification applies. Now the stage 3, the credit impaired stage. Now you have this impairment evidence. The borrower has defaulted or is expected to default, and because of that the provision jumps to 88,000. Or sorry, the provision jumps to 8 lakhs. And the interest calculation also shifts. So the three critical things have happened. First, the PD jumps, and second, the interest calculation also flips from gross to net. Now, and the third, the accounting treatment also changes. Stage 2 is conservative and still assumes that the repayment will happen, whereas stage 3, the recognition that losses will be incurred. And that is why the stage 3 is where the real economic loss has shown up. Interest on the net instead of gross, and the provisions reflect near total loss. The accounting reflects the impairment and not just the risk. Now the stage 3, this is the final stage, the credit impaired assets, and this is where the loans go when the borrower has experienced the objective evidence of loss. A financial asset is classified in stage 3 if there is objective evidence of credit impairment. The borrower has experienced one or more loss events that have a negative impact on the estimated future cash flows. And this isn't subjective, it's factual, documented, and verifiable. If a borrower is 90 days past due on any material payment, automatic stage 3 classification applies. No exceptions, no management judgment allowed, and this is non-rebuttable. Banks cannot argue their way out. The 90-day backstop alone is sufficient, and bankruptcy here is not required. So it must be objective and not subjective, not a rating downgrade alone, not the sector stress alone, and not a covenant breach with the waiver. Objective evidence includes the bankruptcy or the solvency filings, material breach of the contract with failure to cure, and the probability of future default based on the observable evidence showing that the borrower will not pay in full without the restructuring. Additional objective evidence triggers can be like the bankruptcy or the insolvency, material breach of contract, significant financial difficulty, probability of future default, and the borrower initiated restructuring. So basically, the 90-day backstop is sufficient alone to trigger the stage 3. And no bankruptcy is required here. No restructuring is needed. Just 90 days past due and you are automatically impaired. Now we see the full economic impact. Stage 3 uses the same formula as stage 2 but with one critical change. Probability of default here becomes the 100%. Stage 3 ECL equals to the EAD times the lifetime PD times the LGD. And the structure is identical to stage 1 and 2, but in stage 3, here the lifetime PD is 100% or near close to 100%. The borrower has defaulted or will certainly default. Thus, this is certain loss and not the estimated loss. Outstanding balance here is still 2 millions and remaining maturity is now 2 years 9 months and it's aged since the origination. Original EIR is 5.5% and LGD is now 40%, unchanged. But lifetime PD jumps to 100% and the borrower has defaulted or the 90-day backstop untriggered. The undiscounted ECL calculation we have discussed, and applying the discount also, if you apply in the formula, the current state will come out to 7,43,115. Right? So from the provision journey, if you understand, the stage 1 is 9,600, stage 2 is 62,680, and stage 3 is 7,43,115. So total provisions increase from origination to default, and that will become 7,33,515. On a 2 million loan, this is a massive hit. So what does this mean? A 2 million loan now carries a 7,43,115 provision. The banks expect to recover only 1.2 million approx. It's a massive change from the original stage 1 assumption that the full 2 millions would be repaid, but only 62.8% of the original will be repaid. So stage 3 recognition is late but mandatory, and by the time you hit the stage 3, the damage is done. And that is why the stage 2 identification matters so much, because you will catch the credit problems early before they deteriorate to default. Now let's move to the critical shift that happens in stage 3. Interest calculation flips from gross to net, and this creates a double hit to the earnings. The critical difference lies in the stage 1 and stage 2 first. Here the interest accrues on the gross carrying amount. You can see that the stage 1 interest is about 1,10,000 and the stage 2 is also the same. But since stage 3 is impaired and the interest will be calculated on the net carrying amount, the result will come out to be 69,129. Now the stage 3 punches the earnings twice. If you calculate the net carrying amount, the stage 3 interest revenue and everything, you will see that the interest revenue drops. If you look at the right table, you will see that the interest revenue drops. Then from where it drops from the 1,10,000 to 69,129, and that's a negative of 40,871. You can calculate at your own end. Then the ECL expense also increased significantly. But since the asset is impaired, you don't need to expect to collect the full amount. Interest accrues only on what you expect to recover. And the net carrying amount reflects the realistic recovery expectations. Here the interest on net is economic reality. You are only earning interest on the money you would actually expect to collect. So interest on net amount reflects what you actually expect to receive and what was not contracted. And this is the moment the stage 3 becomes real on the bank's financial. Now stage 3 is where the regulators, rating agencies and investors focus their attention. This is non-performing loans and it's highly scrutinized. 5 critical groups monitor the stage 3 closely. The banks, regulators and the supervisors, credit rating agencies, equity investors, bond investors, internal credit committees. Now a healthy bank has a stage 3 NPL ratios below 2%. That's normal and expected. Stage 3 at 2 to 3% signals the early distress. The bank is experiencing some credit deterioration. So stage 3 at 5% to 7% triggers the significantly regulatory focus. So here we are discussing the NPL ratio severity scale, the healthy bank's benchmark it can be. And rest for the 10% plus means the crisis and the capital concerns. So basically in stress scenarios, in economic downturns, stage 3 can spike from 3% to 5% in just 12 to 18 months. And during the global financial crisis, banking sector stage 3 exploded. During pandemic shutdowns, consumer and the SME stage 3, they will surged. During the sector crashes, the real estate's oil and gas concentration risk materializes. So regulators look at what's driving the stage 3. If 100% of stage 3 is commercial real estate, if let's say, then you are in concentration risk territory, which is dangerous. So better profile shows the diversification. So stage 3 is not just an accounting metric, it's how the financial system reads the bank's credit quality. So you need to watch the stage 3 trends, and then you understand which banks are deteriorating before it shows up in your credit spreads or the capital ratios. Now this is the complete cycle summary. I have tried to put it down. Stage 1 is where every loan starts performing, low provisions, and stage 2 happens when credit deteriorates materially. Significant increase in credit risk triggered, and stage 3 occurs when the borrower defaults or becomes credit impaired. And then comes the recovery, where we have the restructuring or the write-offs. Now auditors focus on the stage transition logic. Like they would ask you, like, did SICR criteria apply? Where the stage 2 triggers documented? Where the stage 3 defaults properly identified? Was the 30-day and the 90-day backstop applied? And then you need to verify that the transitions happens for documented and objective reasons. Regulators do examine the stage composition trends. Like, is stage 1 stable or declining? Is stage 2 is growing, like the early warning? And is stage 3 does it really spiking, indicating the crisis situation? As they want to see the appropriate early detection. They fear the banks delaying the stage 2 identification. So the key takeaway is that the stage transitions happens for documented and objective reasons. Every transfer creates the provisions adjustments, and the full loan journey from origination to resolution is what the auditors and regulators scrutinize most carefully. So you should keep an eye on that. Now the discounting recap. It's about the present value mechanics and it matters more for some stages than the others. The core formula is that the discounting ECL is equal to the undiscounted ECL over the 1 plus of original EIR to the power of t, where t is the time period. And the longer the time horizon, the bigger the discounting impact we would see. So I would ask you to go through these calculations in the stage 1, 2 and the mortgage one, the lifetime ECL one. If you have any doubts, drop me in the comments and we'll discuss that. From an industry practice, most common is the midpoint of the remaining maturity to be taken in the calculations. An alternative is the probability defaulted weighted timing using the default curves. And if you want to go more sophisticated, one can do stage by stage discounting using the different curves. But when to use this sophisticated approach? When you have large portfolios or long duration mortgages. For simpler portfolios, midpoint is the standard practice. Now this matrix brings everything together. All key metrics across all the three stages, so you can see a full picture at a glance. Stage 1 triggers no credit deterioration. The loan behaves as expected. Stage 2 triggers the significant increase in credit risk. The rating downgrades, the 30 days past due and other reasons. And stage 3 triggers the objective evidence of credit impairment or the default. The 90 days past due backstop, the bankruptcy and the restructuring. The credit status is our economic reality. Stage 1 is performing, the borrower was paying on time. Stage 2 is underperforming but still paying. And the borrower struggling but current. Stage 3 is impaired or in default, and here the borrower cannot pay at the original terms. Now, the interview focus on the credit risk rules. You need to explain how the staging works, building the ECL models, and you need to code the stage transitions. Portfolio analysis should be done, and you need to understand what stage 2 and 3 growth signals. Regulatory compliance should be there, and you need to ensure the stage transitions are documented and defensible. So basically, the IFRS 9 staging isn't complicated once you understand the structure. Each stage has clear triggers and each transition has clear rules. Application requires a judgment, but the framework is defined. So you need to master this matrix, and if you have mastered this matrix, you have mastered the heart of the IFRS 9, the credit risk loss provisioning. Now the closing slide, this sets up the next level of the detail. We have covered the framework and now we'll dive into the PD numbers that actually come from. We are going to calculate the lifetime PD curves from the historical data and not just the 5% of the assumption, but actually build the curve from the bank's data. We'll incorporate the macroeconomic scenarios and we'll show the practical methodologies used by the consulting firms from the actual banking implementations. The PD number is where the judgment lives in the IFRS 9, and you can have the two banks with identical borrowers but different PD estimates, creating wildly different provisions. So what you already know is that you already have understood that when to use this 12-month ECL versus lifetime ECL. You know what changes at the stage transitions. You can now calculate ECL given a PD. You understand the framework. But how to actually get these PD numbers? Building PD curves from the data, completing the ECL foundation work, how banks validate their models and stress test assumptions. We'll discuss that part. So if today's video has added any value to your learnings, please like, share and subscribe my channel and share it with your friends who are preparing for credit risk interviews. So we'll discuss the PD part, the 12-month ECL versus lifetime ECL part in our next video. And we'll dive this into the topic together. If you have any questions, you can drop down in the comments or you can let me know how would you feel about this video and you can drop your feedback to me. I'll happily look at it. So see you in the next video. Thank you so much.